Please, don't take him away. He was freezing. The young mother's voice trembled beneath the rain as security guards surrounded her under the glowing lights of the Grand Regent Hotel, while in her arms, a terrified little boy clung to her coat, like she was the only safe thing left in the world. The city of Chicago shimmered in cold silver that night. Rain hammered against the sidewalks in endless sheets, turning the streets into rivers of blurred neon and shattered reflections. Black luxury sedans lined the entrance of the Grand Regent, while wealthy guests disappeared beneath gold umbrellas and crystal lobby lights. Inside, the annual Callaway Foundation Gala glittered with million-dollar diamonds, champagne towers, and soft piano music drifting beneath chandeliers the size of small cars. Outside, barely 20 feet from the red carpet, Clara Bennett stood beside a flickering vending machine, trying to warm a bottle of milk between her hands. At 24 years old, Clara looked far older than she should have. Exhaustion lived beneath her pale blue eyes like permanent shadows. Damp strands of blonde hair clung to her cheeks from the rain, and her thin gray sweater was soaked through from carrying her baby across downtown streets in 40-degree weather. The infant in her arms whimpered softly beneath a faded pink blanket. Lily was only 8 months old, small enough to fit against Clara's chest like a fragile heartbeat she was terrified to lose. Clara adjusted the blanket carefully, shielding Lily from the wind that whipped through the alley beside the hotel. Her fingers were red from cold. She had spent the last 11 hours working double shifts at a diner 3 blocks away, serving burgers to businessmen who barely looked at her face when they handed over crumpled bills. Tonight's tips had barely covered diapers and formula. The motel she'd been sleeping in for the past week had kicked her out that morning when she couldn't pay for another night. So now she stood beneath the glowing towers of downtown Chicago with nowhere left to go except her old Honda parked 6 blocks away. Around her, the city moved fast and indifferent. Expensive heels clicked across marble floors just beyond the glass doors while valets rushed to open car doors for men in tailored suits. Clara avoided looking inside. Worlds like that weren't built for women like her. She turned back toward Lily, pressing the bottle gently against the baby's tiny hands, when suddenly she heard it. Crying. Not a tantrum. Not the loud frustration of a spoiled child. This was different. Quiet. Broken. The kind of crying that sounded lonely. Clara looked toward the side entrance of the hotel. Near the edge of the alley, half hidden beside a black SUV, stood a little boy in a navy blazer soaked by rain. He couldn't have been older than 7. His small shoulders shook as tears rolled silently down his face. Guests brushed past him without stopping. One man glanced down briefly before continuing toward the ballroom without a word. The boy wrapped his arms around himself tighter, trying to disappear into the shadows. Clara stared for only a second before instinct moved her feet. She shifted Lily carefully against her chest and walked toward him through the rain. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling beside him despite the freezing pavement soaking through her jeans. "Are you okay?" The little boy flinched at first, startled by her voice. His cheeks were pink from cold, and his dark brown hair clung wetly to his forehead. He looked toward the glowing ballroom doors behind him, then back down at the ground. "I can't find my dad," he whispered. Clara's heart tightened immediately. She glanced around the crowded entrance. Nobody seemed to notice the missing child standing alone in the storm. She looked back at him and forced the gentlest smile she could manage despite her exhaustion. "What's your name?" "Noah." "Well, Noah," she said quietly, removing her own coat and wrapping it around his tiny shoulders without hesitation. "You're not alone anymore." From inside the parked SUV across the curb, a pair of watchful eyes lifted slowly toward the rain-covered window, locking onto the young mother kneeling beside his son. Inside the black SUV, Ethan Callaway sat motionless behind the tinted glass while rain traced slow silver lines across the window beside him. The soft glow from the hotel entrance reflected against his sharp features, but his attention never left the young woman kneeling beside his son. Around him, security teams spoke urgently into earpieces. Guests continued pouring into the ballroom, unaware that the billionaire host of the evening had gone completely silent. Ethan barely heard the voices around him anymore. All he saw was Noah wrapped inside a stranger's coat, while that stranger stood in freezing rain holding a baby against her chest. "Sir, we found him," one of the guards said through the front seat. "Do you want us to bring Master Noah inside?" Ethan lifted one hand slowly, stopping them. Wait. His voice was low and distant. Noah had not smiled in nearly 8 months. Not since the funeral. Not since white lilies covered his mother's casket beneath gray November skies. Since then, the boy had drifted through life like a ghost trapped inside a mansion too large for grief. Expensive tutors failed to reach him. Therapists failed. Nannies came and went every few weeks because Noah refused to speak to them. Even Ethan himself no longer knew how to cross the painful silence growing between them. But now, through the rain-streaked glass, Ethan saw something impossible. Noah was talking. The little boy looked up at Clara with cautious eyes while she adjusted Lily carefully against her shoulder. Her baby stirred softly beneath the blanket, tiny fingers curling against her sweater. Clara smiled gently at Noah despite the exhaustion written across her pale face. "Do you like dinosaurs?" she asked quietly. Noah gave the smallest shrug. "A little. Lily likes them too," Clara whispered. "Well, she likes chewing on the toy ones anyway." For the first time all night, Noah let out a faint laugh. It was small, fragile, but Ethan felt it hit his chest harder than anything he had heard in months. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers sparkled above hundreds of wealthy guests sipping champagne beneath gold-trimmed ceilings. A string quartet played softly near the stage while giant screens displayed the Callaway Foundation logo in elegant silver letters. The entire event had been organized to celebrate corporate expansion and philanthropic partnerships worth hundreds of millions of dollars. None of it mattered to Ethan anymore. Not while his son stood outside in the rain beside a woman who clearly had almost nothing. Clara crouched lower beside Noah and noticed his hands trembling from cold. Without hesitation, she took the warm bottle she had prepared for Lily and pressed it gently into Noah's hands instead. "Here," she said softly. "Hold this for a minute. It helps." Noah stared at her. "But your baby needs it." Clara glanced down at Lily sleeping against her chest. Her expression softened. "She has me," she whispered. "Right now, you need it more." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Something painful moved through him then, something deeper than guilt. Because for the first time all evening, he noticed details he normally would never see. Clara's worn sneakers soaked through with rainwater. The dark circles beneath her eyes. The way she shifted slightly to shield both children from the wind while leaving herself exposed to the cold. She was exhausted. Hungry probably. Maybe homeless. Yet somehow she still looked at Noah with more patience than most people in his entire world ever had. The security chief leaned back toward Ethan again. "Sir, should we step in now?" Ethan looked through the glass one more time as Noah slowly moved closer beside Clara, no longer crying, no longer alone. Then the billionaire answered quietly, almost to himself. No, his eyes remained fixed on the woman outside. "I want to see what happens next." The rain only grew heavier. Wind curled through the downtown streets like icy fingers, rattling the hotel flags above the entrance while taxis splashed through puddles reflecting gold and crimson city lights. Clara pulled Lily closer beneath the blanket and tried to ignore the ache spreading through her shoulders. She had been carrying her daughter for nearly 2 hours. Every muscle in her body burned with exhaustion, but she kept smiling at Noah because the little boy looked like someone trying very hard not to fall apart. "Did you really run away from a party?" Clara asked gently. Noah nodded while clutching the warm bottle between both hands. "I hate those parties." "Why?" she asked softly. He looked toward the glowing ballroom windows where silhouettes of wealthy guests drifted behind crystal chandeliers. "Everybody talks about money." His voice grew smaller. "Nobody talks to me." Clara felt something tighten painfully inside her chest. She knew loneliness when she saw it. Some nights, she sat awake in her old Honda listening to Lily breathe in the back seat while wondering if the whole world had simply forgotten people like them existed. She brushed damp hair behind her ear and glanced down at Noah again. "I think your dad is probably worried about you." Noah shrugged weakly. "He is always busy." The words were quiet, but they carried the kind of sadness children should never know. Inside the SUV, Ethan heard every word through the slightly lowered window. Each sentence landed heavier than the rain pounding against the roof. He stared at his son sitting beside a stranger more comfortably than he had sat beside his own father in months. The realization hollowed something inside him. Ethan had spent his entire life building empires. Callaway Dynamics employed over 40,000 people across the country. Financial magazines called him a visionary. Television anchors called him one of the most powerful men in America. Yet somehow he had failed at the one thing his late wife begged him not to lose after she got sick. Promise me Noah never feels alone. Her voice still haunted him sometimes in the middle of sleepless nights. Outside, Clara noticed Noah shivering again. Without thinking, she rubbed warmth back into his tiny hands. Lily stirred softly against her chest and released a weak cry. Clara immediately shifted her attention, rocking her daughter gently while whispering comforting little words beneath the storm. Noah watched her carefully. Does your baby cry a lot? Clara smiled tiredly. Only when she is hungry or cold or misses sleeping in a real bed. Noah blinked. You do not have a house. Clara hesitated for only a second. Children deserved honesty. Not right now. Noah looked confused. Where do you sleep? She glanced toward the dark street beyond the hotel lights where her aging Honda sat, parked several blocks away beneath a broken street lamp. Wherever we can. Noah stared at her silently after that. His small face slowly changed as realization settled into him. For the first time in his sheltered young life, he was looking directly at hardship, not through charity commercials or school fundraisers. Real hardship, standing in the rain wearing soaked shoes and holding a hungry baby. Yet Clara still treated him gently, still worried about whether he was warm enough. Ethan saw Noah lower his eyes toward the pavement, suddenly ashamed of the expensive watch on his wrist and the polished shoes costing more than Clara probably earned in a month. The billionaire exhaled slowly and leaned back against the leather seat. Around him, executives continued texting about speeches and investors waiting upstairs. None of them knew their CEO sat frozen by the sight of a struggling mother giving away the little warmth she had left. Then suddenly the hotel doors burst open. 2 security guards hurried into the storm, scanning the entrance frantically while guests stepped aside in alarm. One of the guards spotted Noah instantly beside Clara and grabbed his radio. We found him. Clara looked up in confusion as several men in dark suits rushed toward them through the rain. The moment the guards rushed toward them, the warmth around Noah vanished. The little boy stiffened beside Clara as black dress shoes splashed through puddles and sharp voices cut through the rain. Guests near the hotel entrance slowed to watch. Expensive coats turned toward the commotion while flashes from valet cameras reflected across wet marble and polished car doors. Clara instinctively tightened her hold on Lily as the first security guard approached. Sir, the man shouted toward Noah, breathing hard with relief. We have been looking everywhere for you. Noah immediately stepped closer to Clara instead of the guards. The movement was small, but Ethan noticed it from inside the SUV. The second guard barely glanced at Clara before his expression hardened. His eyes moved quickly across her soaked clothes, worn sneakers, and the sleeping baby against her chest. Suspicion settled over his face. Almost instantly. Who is she? He demanded sharply. Clara blinked in confusion and slowly stood from the pavement. I just found him out here alone, she explained softly. He was cold and crying. The guard did not relax. If anything, he looked more alarmed. Ma'am, step away from the child. Noah grabbed Clara's sleeve immediately. No, the little boy's voice trembled. She helped me, but the scene already looked wrong from the outside. A soaked young woman holding a wealthy child outside one of the most exclusive hotels in Chicago, while security teams searched frantically nearby. People began whispering beneath the hotel awning. Clara could feel their eyes crawling across her like cold rain. She knew those looks. Poor, suspicious, out of place, dangerous simply because she did not belong near wealth like this. One woman wearing diamonds under a white fur coat leaned toward her husband and whispered loudly enough for Clara to hear. Oh my God, was she trying to take him? Clara's face drained of color instantly. No, she said quickly. I would never. Please hand the boy over, the guard interrupted. His voice stayed professional, but firm. Clara looked down at Noah. The child was frightened again, tears gathering in his eyes while rainwater dripped from his hair. Slowly, gently, Clara loosened the coat around his shoulders. It is okay, she whispered to him. Your family is here now. Noah shook his head immediately. I do not want to go back inside. Sir, another guard said urgently into his earpiece. We have the child, but there may be an issue. Inside the SUV, Ethan's jaw tightened. He could already see what was happening. The judgment, the assumptions. the quiet humiliation settling over Clara's face, while wealthy strangers stared at her like she was something shameful standing too close to privilege. He opened the car door slowly. Cold rain swept into the vehicle immediately, carrying the scent of wet concrete and winter air. Outside, Clara carefully adjusted Lily against her chest again. Her baby had started crying softly from the cold. Tiny trembling sounds escaped beneath the blanket, while Clara bounced her gently, trying to comfort both children at once. Noah looked at Lily, then back at Clara. "Your baby is freezing," he whispered. Clara forced a tired smile. "She will be okay." But Ethan noticed the truth instantly. Clara's hands were shaking badly now. Her lips had turned pale from the cold. She had given her coat away nearly 20 minutes earlier and never once asked for it back. One of the guards reached carefully toward Noah. "Come on, sir. Your father is waiting." Noah suddenly stepped backward beside Clara again. "Stop," he cried. Several guests turned fully toward the scene now. Phones quietly appeared in hands. The tension in the air thickened beneath the falling rain. Then Noah looked up with tears running down his cheeks and shouted the words that silenced the entire entrance. "She saved me." The crowd froze. Even the guards hesitated. Noah pointed toward Clara with trembling little hands. "Everybody walked past me," he cried. Nobody cared except her. And at that exact moment, Ethan Calloway stepped out from the black SUV into the rain. The entire hotel entrance seemed to hold its breath as Ethan Calloway stepped into the storm. Rain darkened the shoulders of his tailored black coat almost instantly, but he barely noticed. The murmurs around him shifted immediately. Guests straightened. Valets lowered their eyes. Security guards stepped back with sudden tension written across their faces. Even beneath the freezing rain and flashing city lights, Ethan carried the kind of presence money could not buy and power could not hide. Clara recognized him at once. Everybody in America knew Ethan Calloway. His face appeared on magazine covers beside headlines about billion-dollar mergers and technology revolutions. Yet standing only a few feet away now, he looked nothing like the polished businessman from television interviews. He looked tired, deeply tired. His eyes moved first to Noah, then slowly toward Clara holding Lily beneath the soaked blanket. For one long moment, nobody spoke. Rain hammered against the hotel awning overhead, while distant thunder rolled somewhere above the city skyline. Noah broke the silence first. "Dad," he whispered. Ethan knelt immediately despite the rain, soaking through his slacks. "Hey, buddy." His voice softened in a way Clara had not expected from a man like him. Noah rushed forward and wrapped his small arms tightly around his father's neck. Ethan held him close with visible relief, closing his eyes briefly like he had just recovered something priceless. Then Noah pulled back slightly and pointed toward Clara again. "She stayed with me." Ethan looked at Clara fully now. Up close, he could see details the rain had hidden before. The faint purple shadows beneath her eyes from exhaustion. The tiny tear along one sleeve of her sweater. The way she kept shifting Lily beneath the blanket to block the wind from reaching the baby's face. Clara lowered her eyes instinctively beneath his attention. Wealth like his had a way of making ordinary people feel smaller without saying a word. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. The sincerity in his voice surprised everyone around them. Clara blinked once, caught off guard. "He was alone," she answered softly. "I could not just leave him there." One of the hotel guests nearby scoffed quietly under her breath. "Convenient story." Ethan heard it immediately. His expression changed in an instant. He rose slowly to his feet and turned toward the crowd gathered beneath the entrance lights. Water dripped from his coat, while silence spread across the marble steps. "This woman protected my son tonight," he said calmly. While hundreds of people walked past him, nobody answered. The woman in diamonds who spoke earlier suddenly looked away. Ethan turned back toward Clara again, but this time his eyes landed on Lily. The baby was trembling harder now despite Clara's desperate attempts to keep her warm. Tiny crying sounds escaped beneath the blanket. Ethan frowned immediately. "Your daughter needs to get inside." Clara hesitated. Pride flickered across her exhausted face. "We are okay," she said automatically. Ethan glanced at her soaked clothes and pale lips. "No," he answered gently. "You are not." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but suddenly Lily released a weak cough against her chest. The sound sliced through the cold night air. Ethan looked toward his security team instantly. "Get the pediatric concierge downstairs now." The guards moved immediately. Clara's eyes widened with panic. "No hospital," she said quickly. "I cannot afford." "You are not paying for anything," Ethan interrupted softly. Noah stepped closer beside Clara again and tugged lightly on his father's sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "can they come inside with us?" Ethan looked down at his son carefully. For months, Noah barely spoke more than a few words at a time. Yet now there was urgency in his voice. "Hope even." Ethan stared at Clara one more time while cold rain continued falling around them. Then slowly, the billionaire removed the expensive wool scarf from around his own neck and handed it toward Lily. "Please," he said quietly, "let me help." Clara stood frozen beneath the golden hotel lights while the entire entrance watched the richest man in the city offer warmth to the woman everyone else had treated like she did not belong. The warmth inside the Grand Regent Hotel felt unreal after the freezing storm outside. Heat rolled through the marble lobby in soft waves scented with polished cedar, expensive perfume, and fresh flowers flown in that morning from California. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead like frozen stars, while wealthy guests quietly parted to let Ethan Calloway pass beside the soaked young mother carrying her baby. Clara felt every eye in the building following her. Her wet sneakers squeaked softly against the marble floor, while water dripped from the hem of her jeans onto carpets probably worth more than her entire life savings. She wanted to disappear. Years of struggling had taught her how quickly rich people could turn kindness into humiliation. But Noah refused to leave her side. The little boy walked close beside Clara while still wrapped in her oversized coat. Every few seconds, he glanced up at her as if making sure she had not vanished. Ethan noticed it all. The concierge rushed forward nervously holding warm towels, while hotel staff whispered urgently into headsets. Across the ballroom entrance, investors and politicians stared openly at the strange sight unfolding before them. America's most powerful CEO had abandoned his own gala to escort a homeless mother through the center of it. Clara lowered her eyes as they passed enormous gold-framed mirrors and velvet seating areas glowing beneath soft amber light. She had never been inside a place like this before. Even the silence sounded expensive. "This way," Ethan said gently. His voice no longer carried the cold authority from magazine interviews. Tonight it sounded almost careful, like he was afraid of startling someone already carrying too much pain. He guided them toward a private lounge near the elevators while a pediatric doctor hurried through the hallway carrying a medical case. Clara immediately stiffened. "Please," she whispered, tightening her hold on Lily. "She is okay. She just gets cold easily." The doctor smiled kindly. "I only want to check her breathing, ma'am." Clara hesitated, then slowly nodded. Ethan watched silently while the doctor examined Lily beside the fireplace. The baby's tiny cheeks were pale from the cold, but after several tense moments, the physician finally looked up with reassurance. "She is all right," he said softly, "just exhausted and underweight." Clara released a shaky breath she had been holding for hours. Her eyes closed briefly in relief. Ethan noticed how quickly she thanked the doctor, almost apologetically, as though she felt guilty for taking up anyone's time. Noah climbed quietly onto the couch beside Clara while she rocked Lily against her shoulder near the firelight. For the first time all night, warmth slowly returned to her face. Ethan stood several feet away watching the scene unfold in silence. Something about it unsettled him deeply. Clara looked exhausted beyond words, yet every instinct she had still centered around protecting others first. Noah tugged lightly at Clara's sleeve. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Clara smiled faintly. "I am okay." But Noah frowned immediately. "That means yes." Ethan almost smiled at that. It sounded exactly like his late wife. Before Clara could protest again, Noah grabbed a tray of untouched pastries from the coffee table and carefully carried it toward her. "Here," he whispered shyly. Clara stared down at the food for a second too long. Ethan noticed it immediately. Hunger has a silence to it when someone has lived with it long enough. Clara tried to refuse politely. "Sweetheart, you should eat those." Noah shook his head stubbornly and placed the tray directly into her hands. "You gave me your coat," he said quietly, "and your baby's bottle." Clara's composure nearly cracked then. She looked down quickly before anyone could see the sudden tears gathering in her eyes. Ethan turned slightly toward the fireplace, pretending not to notice. But inside, something painful shifted in him. Because sitting in that glowing private lounge, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, the person with the least had shown the greatest kindness. And for the first time in years, Ethan Calloway began to feel ashamed of how blind success had made him. Nearly an hour passed inside the private lounge while the storm continued raging against the hotel windows. The gala downstairs carried on with polished speeches and applause echoing faintly through distant hallways, but Ethan Calloway had not returned once to the ballroom. Instead, he remained near the fireplace watching Noah slowly come back to life beside Clara and Lily. It happened in tiny moments at first, Noah asking if he could hold Lily's stuffed rabbit, Clara laughing softly when he made silly faces trying to stop the baby from crying. The little boy even smiled fully once when Lily grabbed his finger with surprising strength. Ethan stood quietly beside the windows, unable to remember the last time he had seen genuine joy on his son's face. It hurt more than he expected, because now the contrast was impossible to ignore. Therapists had charged him thousands of dollars to reconnect with Noah after his wife died. Luxury vacations failed. Expensive gifts failed. Yet somehow a homeless mother with nothing but kindness had reached his son in less than an hour. Clara carefully fed Lily the rest of the warmed bottle while Noah sat beside her under the glow of the firelight. Her movements carried the exhaustion of someone who had survived too many difficult nights, but there was still gentleness in everything she did. Even tired, she listened carefully when Noah spoke. Even hungry, she made sure Lily stayed fed first. Ethan finally stepped closer toward them. "How old is your daughter?" he asked quietly. Clara looked up slightly startled, almost like she forgot he was still there. 8 months, she answered softly. "Her name is Lily." Ethan nodded slowly. "She is beautiful." Clara smiled faintly at that. It was the first real smile he had seen from her all night. It transformed her face completely, softening the exhaustion for just a moment. Noah looked between them before quietly asking, "Where is Lily's dad?" The room fell silent immediately. Clara lowered her eyes toward the baby in her arms. For a second, Ethan regretted not stopping the question. But Clara simply brushed one finger gently across Lily's tiny hand and answered honestly. "He worked construction." Her voice remained calm, but distant somehow. "There was an accident last winter." Ethan felt the words settle heavily inside the room. Clara never asked for sympathy. That somehow made the pain stronger. Noah looked down quietly. "I am sorry." Clara reached over and squeezed his small hand gently. "Thank you, sweetheart." Ethan stared into the fireplace after that, jaw tight with thought. His own grief had wrapped itself in penthouses, private jets, and board meetings. Clara's grief had wrapped itself in motel rooms, night shifts, and sleeping in a car with a baby. Yet somehow she still carried warmth inside her, while Ethan had allowed sorrow to turn him cold. A soft knock interrupted the silence. One of Ethan's assistants stepped carefully into the room, holding a tablet. "Sir," he whispered awkwardly, "the investors are asking if you are returning for the final presentation." Ethan barely looked at him. "Cancel it." The assistant blinked in confusion. "Sir, reschedule everything." The young man hesitated. "There are senators downstairs waiting to speak with you." Ethan glanced toward Noah, laughing quietly as Lily gripped his finger again. For the first time in nearly a year, his son did not look lonely. "Then they can wait." The assistant left speechless. Clara stared at Ethan carefully after the door closed. Men like him did not cancel meetings worth millions of dollars for strangers. "You do not have to stay here," she said softly. "We will leave once the rain slows down." Ethan looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Clara," he said quietly, "when was the last time you and your daughter slept somewhere safe?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Clara froze instantly. Her fingers tightened protectively around Lily while embarrassment flickered across her face. Ethan already knew the answer before she spoke. "A while," she whispered. Noah looked up immediately toward his father. Ethan slowly knelt beside his son and brushed rain-damp hair from the little boy's forehead. "Would you like to help me do something important tonight?" Noah nodded carefully. Ethan looked toward Clara again. "Then maybe," he said softly, "we can start by making sure nobody you care about sleeps in a car ever again." Clara did not know what frightened her more that night. The idea of trusting someone as powerful as Ethan Calloway, or the terrifying possibility that he genuinely meant every word he said. She sat quietly near the fireplace, holding Lily close while warm light flickered across the private lounge walls. Outside the towering windows, downtown Chicago still drowned beneath rain and silver fog, but inside, the world had gone strangely still. Noah sat cross-legged on the carpet beside Lily's blanket, carefully stacking sugar packets into crooked little towers while the baby watched him with sleepy fascination. Every few seconds, he looked toward Clara to see if she approved. And every time she smiled softly, Ethan felt something inside him tighten again. His son had been starving for kindness. Not attention, not money. Something far simpler. Something Clara gave naturally without realizing it. Ethan stepped toward the windows and quietly called someone from his phone. His voice remained low, but Clara caught fragments. Tomorrow morning, furnished apartment, temporary lease under foundation housing, pediatric specialist appointment, first thing. Clara immediately shook her head. Mr. Calloway, you do not have to do this. Ethan turned slowly toward her. Yes, he answered gently. I do. Clara lowered her eyes. Pride and exhaustion fought silently across her face. She had spent too long surviving alone to accept help easily. People do not just help strangers like this, she whispered. Ethan looked at Noah sitting beside Lily. Maybe they should. Silence settled over the room again. The fire cracked softly while distant thunder rolled beyond the glass skyline. Finally, Clara spoke, almost embarrassed. I was only trying to comfort a little boy. Ethan stared at her carefully then. Most people would have walked past him. Clara looked genuinely confused by that. He was crying. Her answer was so simple it nearly broke something inside him. No calculation. No hidden motive. Just humanity. Ethan slowly sat across from her for the first time that evening. Without the distance of bodyguards and boardrooms between them, he suddenly looked older than Clara expected. The kind of tired no amount of wealth could hide. My wife used to stop for everybody, he said quietly. Stray dogs. Lost tourists. Crying children. A faint smile touched his face before fading again. She used to tell me kindness was the one thing people remember after everything else disappears. Clara listened silently while rocking Lily gently against her shoulder. She passed away last year. Ethan continued softly. After that, I buried myself in work because I did not know what else to do. His eyes drifted toward Noah. I thought providing for my son meant giving him everything. Noah looked up from the carpet then. Ethan's voice grew quieter. Tonight, I realized I forgot to give him myself. The honesty in his words filled the room heavier than the storm outside. Clara understood grief. She recognized it immediately in people because she carried it too. You still showed up for him tonight, she whispered. Ethan looked toward her with surprise. Most people feared him, admired him, wanted something from him. Very few spoke to him plainly anymore. You ran into the rain for him, Clara continued softly. That matters. Ethan stared at her for a long moment without speaking. Then suddenly Noah stood up holding Lily's stuffed rabbit awkwardly in both hands. Dad, Ethan blinked. Yeah, buddy. Noah hesitated before asking quietly. Can Clara and Lily come visit again tomorrow? The room fell completely silent. Clara looked startled while Noah waited nervously beside the fireplace. Ethan glanced between them slowly. For months his son barely asked for anything beyond being left alone. Yet tonight, after 1 hour beside Clara, he was already afraid of losing her too. Ethan looked toward Clara carefully. Rainwater still stained the edges of her sweater. Exhaustion still shadowed her face. But Lily was finally sleeping peacefully against her chest, warm and safe for the first time all night. Then Ethan answered in the gentlest voice Noah had heard from him in months. I think, he said softly, that can be arranged. 6 months later, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the Eleanor Grace Family Foundation, turning the polished lobby floors into rivers of gold. Outside, downtown Chicago moved with its usual restless energy, taxis rushing past crowded sidewalks and towering buildings catching the pale blue glow of early spring. But inside the foundation headquarters, the atmosphere felt different. Softer somehow. Warmer. Near the reception desk, a little girl with pale blonde curls sat laughing inside a blanket fort made from office pillows, while a 7-year-old boy carefully balanced stuffed animals along the top, like tiny guards protecting a castle. Noah, Clara called gently from across the room, trying not to smile too hard. Lily is supposed to be inside the fort, not eating it. Noah grinned immediately while lifting the stuffed rabbit away from the baby's mouth. Sorry. His laughter echoed through the bright lobby like sunlight itself. Employees passing through the building slowed instinctively when they heard it. 6 months ago, that sound had almost disappeared from Noah Calloway's life entirely. Now it filled entire rooms. Clara stepped out from the foundation conference room, carrying a stack of housing applications against her chest. She looked different now, healthier, rested. Her blonde hair fell neatly across the shoulders of a soft blue sweater, and the constant exhaustion that once haunted her eyes had finally begun to fade. Not because someone rescued her, but because someone finally gave her a chance to stand again. Ethan watched quietly from the second-floor balcony overlooking the lobby below. He had a board meeting scheduled in 20 minutes with investors from Silicon Valley, but for once in his life, work no longer felt like the center of his world. His gaze followed Noah laughing beside Lily while Clara knelt to straighten the little boy's collar before his tutoring session. Such a small gesture. Such an ordinary moment. Yet Ethan felt his chest tighten every time he saw it. Home. That was the word he kept thinking lately. Not mansion. Not empire. Home. The foundation itself had changed too. Originally created in his late wife's memory as little more than a ceremonial charity branch for the company, it had become something entirely different after that stormy night outside the hotel. Clara now helped oversee emergency family housing outreach across the city. She understood people others overlooked because she had once been invisible too. Mothers sleeping in cars. Children hiding hunger behind polite smiles. Families one paycheck away from disappearing. Clara noticed the ones everyone else walked past. And because of that, the foundation began changing lives faster than any publicity campaign ever could. Ethan slowly descended the staircase into the lobby while staff members greeted him respectfully. Noah spotted him instantly and ran over with excited energy. "Dad," he said proudly, "Lily said my name today." Clara laughed softly. It sounded more like, "No, but I think it counts." Ethan smiled before crouching beside his son. "That is still impressive, buddy." Noah leaned closer then lowered his voice seriously. "Can they stay for dinner tonight?" Ethan glanced up toward Clara. Some things between them remained unspoken even after all these months. Not because there was distance, but because both of them understood how fragile healing could be. Clara still carried grief quietly inside her. So did he. Yet somewhere between shared breakfasts, hospital visits, bedtime stories, and rebuilding broken pieces of their lives, loneliness no longer controlled the rooms they stood in. Ethan looked back toward Noah and smiled softly. "I was hoping they would." Noah cheered and sprinted back toward Lily immediately. Clara shook her head with quiet amusement before looking toward Ethan. For a moment, neither spoke. The sunlight pouring through the windows painted soft gold across the lobby around them, while Lily's laughter echoed between marble walls that once felt cold and empty. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "You changed our lives." Ethan looked toward the children instead of himself. "No," he answered quietly. "You changed mine first." Across the city, millions of people still hurried through crowded streets without noticing the strangers beside them. But inside that building, warmth existed because one exhausted young mother stopped in the rain for a lonely little boy everyone else ignored. And in the end, it was not wealth that saved anyone that night. It was kindness.